The first time I saw Eli, the morning was so quiet it felt like the world had paused just to watch him step out of the barn. Mist clung to the fields like a thin white veil, softening the lines of the wooden fences and the low hills beyond. The air smelled of damp hay and earth, the kind of smell that sinks into your clothes and lingers long after you've gone back inside. I remember standing on the porch of the guest house, coffee cooling in my hands, thinking how peaceful everything felt. Too peaceful, almost. Like the calm before a storm you don't know is coming. Eli moved slowly, deliberately, as if every step had a purpose. Plain clothes, suspenders, a straw hat tilted low over his eyes. He couldn't have been much older than me, but there was something in the way he carried himself that made him seem older, steadier. Like he belonged to the land in a way I never could. I told myself not to stare. I'd come to the farm to escape. A messy breakup. A city that felt too loud, too crowded with memories I didn't want to keep. My aunt had said a few weeks in the countryside would clear my head. She hadn't mentioned the Amish family down the road, or the quiet son who worked from dawn to dusk and barely spoke above a whisper. The first time we talked, it was about something stupid. A loose board on the fence. He pointed, I nodded. His voice was soft, careful, like he was afraid of breaking the silence around us. I remember thinking how strange it felt to lean in just to hear him better. After that, I started finding reasons to be near the barn. There was a rhythm to his days that fascinated me. Feed the animals, mend what was broken, pause, sometimes, to look out across the fields like he was searching for something he couldn't quite name. I wondered if he felt trapped here, or if this quiet life was all he'd ever wanted. I wondered what he thought of me. The tension wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It sat in the small spaces between us. In the way his eyes lingered a second too long before he looked away. In the way my chest tightened every time our hands brushed over a bucket or a doorframe. One evening, as the sun bled orange and pink across the sky, I heard a strange sound from the barn. Not the animals, not the wind, something else. A low, uncertain noise that made my stomach twist with curiosity and something dangerously close to hope. I stood at the edge of the yard, heart pounding, telling myself to go back inside. But I didn't, and as I took my first step toward the barn, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever waited for me in that quiet, shadowed space was going to change everything I thought I knew about him, and about myself. Was I walking toward connection, or toward a line I could never uncross? The days after that first strange sound slipped into a kind of careful routine, like the farm itself was holding its breath. Mornings began with the soft clatter of dishes from my aunt's kitchen and the low murmur of voices drifting through open windows. The weather stayed warm, the kind of gentle late summer heat that wrapped around you instead of pressing down. Sunlight spilled across the porch in long, golden stripes, and every time I stepped outside, I half expected to see Eli already there, leaning against a fence post, watching the fields like he had a secret conversation with the land. Sometimes he was. Other times, the barn stood open and empty, and that absence tugged at me in a way I didn't know how to explain. I told myself it was nothing. Just curiosity. Just boredom in a quiet place. But my eyes kept searching for him anyway. When I finally did find him again, it was near the well, hauling up a bucket with slow, steady pulls of the rope. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms dusted with flecks of hay and dirt. He glanced up when he noticed me, and for a second, the world seemed to shrink down to just the two of us and the creak of the rope between his hands. "Morning," I said, my voice sounding too loud in the open space. He nodded. Morning. That was it. That was all. And yet, it felt like more than enough. We stood there in that awkward quiet, the kind where you can almost hear your own thoughts. I wanted to ask him 1,000 things. About his life, about what he wanted, about whether he ever wondered what it would be like to leave this place. But the questions tangled in my chest, heavy and uncertain. So instead, I asked about the weather. He smiled at that, a small, shy curve of his lips that disappeared almost as quickly as it appeared. "Supposed to rain later," he said. "Storm coming from the west." I looked at the sky. Clear, blue, calm. It didn't feel like a storm day. Neither did my heart. After that, I started helping him more. Or at least, I pretended I was helping. Carrying buckets, holding boards steady while he hammered, walking alongside him as he checked the animals. He never told me to go away, but he never invited me to stay either. It was like we were both circling something we were too careful to name. One afternoon, as clouds finally rolled in and dimmed the light, we found ourselves alone in the barn. The air inside was cooler, thick with the smell of hay and wood and something earthy I couldn't quite place. Dust motes floated in the slanted beams of light that cut through the open doors, and every sound felt amplified. The shuffle of his boots. The soft snort of a horse in the stall. My own breathing. He was fixing a broken latch on one of the gates, hands working with practiced ease. I leaned against a post, pretending to watch, pretending my pulse wasn't picking up speed with every movement he made. "Do you ever want to leave?" I asked suddenly. The question surprised both of us. He froze, just for a moment, his hand still wrapped around the latch. "Leave," he repeated. "Yeah," I said. "Go somewhere else. See something different." He straightened slowly, wiping his hands on his pants. His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something deeper there. Not just shyness, not just calm, something like longing. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but this is home." The word hung between us, heavy and simple. I nodded, even though I didn't fully understand it. Home, to me, had always been a place I wanted to escape. To him, it seemed like something he was both rooted in and quietly wrestling with. The first drop of rain hit the roof of the barn with a hollow thud. Then another, and another. Within minutes, the storm was in full swing, rain drumming against the metal and wood, wind rattling the doors. The world outside blurred into a gray wash, and we were trapped inside, our small, shared space feeling even smaller. We stood there, listening. "I guess we're stuck for a bit," I said, trying to sound casual. He nodded. "Looks like it." The silence that followed was different. Thicker. Charged. I became painfully aware of how close we were standing. Close enough to see the faint scar near his eyebrow. Close enough to notice how his chest rose and fell with each breath. I wondered if he noticed mine. The animals shifted in their stalls, restless with the noise of the storm. Somewhere in the rafters, something scurried. The sound made me jump, and without thinking, I stepped closer to him. Our arms brushed. Neither of us moved away. For a moment, I thought he might say something. Anything. But he just looked at me, his expression unreadable, like he was standing at the edge of a thought he wasn't sure he was allowed to have. "I should check the back door," he said finally, his voice a little rougher than before. He walked past me, and the space he left behind felt colder. That night, I lay in bed, listening to the rain fade into a soft, steady patter. My mind replayed the day in fragments. His smile at the well. The look in his eyes when I asked about leaving. The way our arms had touched in the barn. I told myself it didn't mean anything. But the truth was, it meant everything. The next morning, he didn't show up. The barn doors were open. The animals were fed. Everything looked as it should, but Eli was nowhere to be found. A knot formed in my stomach. I asked my aunt if she'd seen him. She shrugged. "Probably out with his family. They do things together on Sundays." Sundays. I hadn't thought about that. About how his life wasn't just his own. About how every choice he made was tied to something bigger, something older. The day dragged on, each hour stretching longer than the last. The calm of the farm felt different without him. Too quiet, too empty. By the time the sun started to sink, painting the sky in soft purples and golds, I couldn't stand it anymore. I grabbed my jacket and headed toward the barn, even though I had no real reason to go there. The doors creaked as I pushed them open. Inside, the space was dim, shadows pulling in the corners. The smell of hay and wood wrapped around me like a memory. I took a few steps in, my boots echoing softly against the floor. Then I heard it, that low, uncertain sound again. It came from the back of the barn, near the small storage room where tools and old equipment were kept. My heart started to race, a mix of worry and something else I didn't want to name. "Eli," I called out. No answer. The sound came again, clearer this time. A voice, muffled, almost like someone arguing in a whisper. I moved closer, every step feeling heavier than the last. The door to the storage room was slightly ajar, light spilling out in a thin line across the floor. I hesitated. This felt like a moment I couldn't take back. My hand hovered over the door, my mind filled with questions. Was he okay? Was I intruding? Was I about to step into something I wasn't meant to see? The storm clouds from the day before were gone, but inside me, the air felt just as charged. I took a breath and pushed the door open. What I saw inside didn't make sense at first. Eli stood there, facing someone I didn't recognize, their voices low and urgent, their expressions tight with something that looked a lot like fear. They both turned when they saw me. Eli's eyes widened, and in that instant, I knew. Whatever this was, whatever he'd been hiding, it was bigger than both of us. And I had just crossed a line that there was no stepping back from. The room felt smaller the moment I stepped inside, like the walls themselves were leaning in to listen. The man standing across from Eli was older, maybe late 20s, with the same plain clothes but a sharper edge to the way he held himself. His jaw was set tight, eyes flicking between me and Eli like he was calculating something he didn't want to say out loud. The air was thick with tension, the kind that settles in your chest and refuses to let you breathe properly. I didn't know you had company, the man said, his voice low. Eli swallowed. I wasn't expecting anyone. That was all he said, but the words carried more weight than they should have. I felt it in the way his shoulders stiffened, in the way his hands curled slightly at his sides like he was bracing for impact. I should go, I muttered, already backing toward the door. No, Eli said, too quickly. Then, softer, it's okay. You can stay. The man's eyes narrowed just a fraction. We stood there in a triangle of silence, the only sound the faint creak of the barn shifting in the evening breeze outside. Somewhere far off, a cow lowed, the sound drifting in through the cracks in the wood like a reminder that the world beyond this room was still moving, still normal. This is Samuel, Eli finally said. He's a friend. Samuel let out a breath that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. That's one way to put it. Eli shot him a look, and something unspoken passed between them. History. Complication. A weight I didn't understand but could feel pressing down on all of us. I'm just here to get my things, Samuel continued. I didn't expect to be interrupted. My chest tightened. Get my things. The words echoed in my head, forming questions I didn't want to ask. I glanced at Eli, searching his face for answers. His eyes met mine for a second, then dropped to the floor. Guilt flickered there, or fear, or both. I didn't know you were coming today, Eli said. I told you I would, Samuel replied. You just didn't answer. Silence fell again, heavier this time. I felt like an intruder in a story that had started long before I ever set foot on this farm. And yet, here I was, standing in the middle of it, heart pounding like I had a role to play whether I wanted one or not. I'll wait outside, I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Eli looked up, and for a moment, I saw something close to panic in his eyes. No, please, don't. That single word, please, wrapped around my chest and squeezed. Samuel studied us both, his gaze sharp and knowing. So that's how it is now. Eli flinched. It's not. Not what? Samuel interrupted. Not what it looks like. The room seemed to tilt, like I'd lost my balance without moving. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to demand answers. I wanted to grab Eli's hand and pull him out of this space, out of whatever past was dragging him down. Instead, I stood there, frozen. Samuel picked up a small bag from the floor, slinging it over his shoulder. You know what they'll say if they find out, he said, his voice dropping. About you, about me, about this. Eli's hands trembled. I know, he whispered. The weight of that word settled over me like a shadow. They, whoever they were, they felt like an invisible presence in the room, watching, waiting, ready to close in. Samuel took a step toward the door, then paused. He looked at me, really looked at me, like he was trying to decide whether I was worth the warning he was about to give. Be careful, he said. You don't know what you're stepping into. Then he was gone, the door creaking softly behind him. The silence he left behind was deafening. Eli sank down onto a wooden crate, his head in his hands. I stood there, unsure if I should approach him or give him space. My heart was still racing, my thoughts a tangled mess of jealousy, worry, and something dangerously close to protectiveness. Who was he? I asked finally. Eli didn't look up. Someone I shouldn't have let get close. The words hit harder than I expected. I took a step toward him. Is that what I am too? He looked up then, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. I don't know, he said. And that's what scares me. I knelt in front of him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. You don't have to be scared, I said, even though my own fear was coiling tight in my chest. He shook his head. You don't understand. Where I come from, this isn't just about feelings. It's about family, faith, everything. The barn groaned softly as a gust of wind passed outside, the sound echoing through the rafters like a low warning. I thought about the quiet mornings. The soft smiles. The way he looked out over the fields like he was searching for something just beyond reach. I realized then that what he'd been searching for might be standing right in front of him. Or maybe it was something he couldn't allow himself to have. I don't want to be a secret, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. His jaw tightened. I don't want you to be either. We sat there, the space between us charged with everything we weren't saying. My hand moved without permission, reaching out, hovering just inches from his. Eli, I whispered. For a moment, I thought he was going to pull away. I saw the conflict play out on his face, duty versus desire, fear versus longing. Then he reached out and took my hand. The contact was simple, innocent, but it felt like an earthquake. My breath hitched, and I saw the same reaction ripple through him. Our fingers intertwined, and in that small, quiet gesture, I felt the weight of what we were doing. What it could cost him. What it could cost me. Don't make me choose, he said, his voice breaking just a little. I squeezed his hand. I'm not asking you to. I just don't want to disappear. The barn door rattled in the wind, the sound sharp and sudden. We both jumped, our hands still locked together. It felt like the world was knocking, reminding us that this moment couldn't stay hidden forever. Eli stood, pulling me up with him. We were face to face now, closer than we'd ever been. I could see every detail of him, the faint scar near his eyebrow, the way his lashes cast shadows on his cheeks, the uncertainty in his eyes. He leaned in, just slightly. Not a kiss. Not quite. Just close enough that I could feel his breath, warm and unsteady. For a heartbeat, everything else fell away. The farm, the family, Samuel's warning, the future, all of it faded into the background, leaving just this fragile, electric space between us. Then a voice called out from outside the barn. Eli. We froze. The sound of footsteps approached, slow and deliberate. Our hands dropped apart like we'd been burned. Eli's face went pale, and I felt my own pulse spike. The door began to open. And in that split second before whoever it was stepped inside, I knew. Whatever we were becoming, whatever we'd just admitted without words, there was no turning back now. The only question was who was about to see us standing on the edge of everything. The door creaked open just enough for a sliver of light to cut across the floor. An older man stood there, framed by the fading sunset. His beard was grayer than Eli's, his posture straighter, his eyes sharp in a way that made me feel suddenly, painfully out of place. He didn't step inside. He didn't need to. His presence alone filled the barn like a weight pressing down on my chest. Eli, he said again, firmer this time. Eli swallowed. Yes, sir. The words stung. Sir. It reminded me how different our worlds were, how much I didn't belong here. I was looking for you, the man continued. Your mother needs help with the supper. I'll be there in a minute, Eli replied, his voice steady but thin. The man's gaze flicked to me. Just for a second, long enough to make my skin prickle. Who's this? He asked. I opened my mouth, but Eli spoke first. He's staying with his aunt. Helping around the farm. The man nodded slowly, as if filing that information away for later. We don't usually have visitors in the barn this late. The words weren't a question. They were a warning. I was just leaving, I said quickly. The man stepped back, giving me room to pass. As I walked by, I felt his eyes follow me, measuring, weighing. The night air outside felt colder than it should have, like the warmth of the barn had been replaced by something sharper. Behind me, I heard the door close. I didn't turn around. I walked until the barn was just a dark shape against the sky, until the sounds of the animals faded into the background, until my heart stopped pounding quite so loudly in my ears. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay in the narrow bed of the guest house, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. Samuel's warning, Eli's trembling hands, the way the older man's eyes had lingered on me. It all felt like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to finish. I kept seeing Eli's face, the conflict written across it like he was carrying two lives inside him and didn't know which one would survive. The next morning, the farm felt different. The air was cooler, the sky overcast, clouds hanging low like they were pressing down on the land. I stepped outside and didn't see Eli by the fence. Didn't hear his quiet footsteps. The absence felt louder than any sound. I helped my aunt with chores, my hands moving on autopilot while my mind stayed stuck in the barn. Every creak of wood, every distant voice made me look up, half expecting to see him. He didn't come. By afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I walked toward the fields, following the narrow path that led past the barn and out to the edge of the property. The grass was damp under my boots, the wind carrying the smell of rain. I found him sitting on a fallen fence post, staring out at the horizon. For a moment, I just watched him. The way his shoulders slumped. The way his hands twisted together in his lap like he was trying to hold himself in one piece. "Hey," I said softly. He didn't jump this time. He just closed his eyes for a second, like he'd been expecting me. "I'm sorry about last night," he said. "About my uncle. About everything." "It's okay," I replied, even though it didn't feel like it was. We stood there in the quiet, the wind rustling through the tall grass around us. "He's not wrong," Eli continued. "This place, it has rules. Lines you don't cross. And what happens if you do?" I asked. He looked at me then, really looked at me, his eyes filled with something that felt dangerously close to grief. "You lose things," he said. "People, home, yourself." The words settled between us, heavy and final. I took a step closer. "What if you lose yourself by staying?" He didn't answer. A low rumble of thunder rolled across the sky, distant but growing. We stood there, the storm building around us, neither of us moving, neither of us willing to say the thing we were both thinking. Finally, Eli spoke. "You should go back, before someone sees us." The sentence hurt more than I expected. I nodded, even though every part of me wanted to argue. As I turned away, I felt his hand brush mine. Just for a second, a touch so light it could have been an accident. But we both knew it wasn't. I walked back toward the house, my chest tight, my thoughts spinning. Behind me, the thunder grew louder, the sky darkening with the promise of rain. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if Eli would choose the life he'd always known or the one he'd only just begun to imagine. All I knew was that whatever line we'd crossed in that barn, whatever moment had changed everything, we were still standing on the edge of it. And the storm was finally about to break. The storm broke that night the way storms always do here, suddenly, without asking permission. Rain hammered against the roof of the guest house, loud enough to drown out my thoughts, but not loud enough to stop them. I lay awake, staring into the dark, every flash of lightning painting Eli's face across the ceiling of my mind. The fields, the barn, his hand brushing mine like a secret we weren't supposed to keep. It all felt too close, too fragile, like if I breathed wrong, it would disappear. By morning, the world was washed clean. The air smelled sharp and new, the sky a pale, uncertain blue. I stepped outside and saw Eli standing by the fence, his clothes damp, his hair darkened by rain. For a moment, we just looked at each other from across the yard, the distance between us feeling wider than the fields beyond. He didn't come over. That hurt more than I expected. The days that followed fell into a strange pattern. We were always near each other, but never together. Passing glances in the kitchen when my aunt wasn't looking. A pause at the end of the path where our routes split. Words hovering on the edge of our lips, never quite making it out. It felt like we were both carrying the same unspoken thing, heavy and dangerous, careful not to let it drop. Samuel's warning echoed in my head more than once. "Be careful." You don't know what you're stepping into. Maybe he was right. One evening, I found Eli in the barn again, alone. The light was low, the shadows long, the familiar smell of hay and wood wrapping around me like a memory I wasn't ready to let go of. You're leaving soon, aren't you? He asked without turning around. The question caught me off guard. My aunt mentioned it. In a few days. He nodded slowly, like he'd already known. Silence stretched between us. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel about that, he admitted. Relief. Or regret. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. What do you feel? He finally turned to face me. His eyes searched mine, like he was looking for something he was afraid to find. Both, he said. The honesty in his voice made my chest ache. We stood there, so close now that I could see every small detail, the way his brow furrowed when he thought too hard, the faint line of worry that never quite left his face. I don't want to be something you run from, I said quietly. You're not, he replied. You're something I don't know how to keep. The words felt like a door opening and closing at the same time. A truck rumbled in the distance, the sound carrying across the fields. The world reminding us, again, that it wasn't just ours. Eli took a step back. I should go, he said. I nodded, even though I didn't want him to. As he walked away, he stopped at the door, his hand resting on the worn wood like he was grounding himself. Maybe, he said without turning around, some things aren't meant to have endings. Just moments. The door closed softly behind him. I stood there alone in the barn, the quiet settling around me like a question I didn't have an answer to. A few days later, my bags were packed, the car waiting in the drive. The farm looked the same as it always had, calm, steady, untouched by the storm we'd stirred inside it. Eli didn't come to say goodbye. Or maybe he did, and I just didn't see him. As I pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to catch a glimpse of him by the fence, watching the road the way he watched the fields. There was nothing there, just the open sky, the long stretch of road, and the echo of a connection that might have been more than a moment, or might have been exactly that. And as the farm disappeared behind me, I couldn't help but wonder. If I ever came back, would Eli still be standing at the edge of the same life? Or would he finally have stepped into a different one, leaving me as just another quiet memory in the place we almost changed everything? The first night I arrived, the sky was so clear it felt like the stars were leaning closer, curious about who I was and why I'd come. The farmhouse sat at the end of a gravel road, its white walls glowing softly under the moonlight. Crickets filled the air with their steady chorus, and somewhere in the distance, a horse snorted, restless in the dark. I stood there for a moment with my bag at my feet, breathing in the smell of hay and damp earth, telling myself this was exactly what I needed. Quiet, space, a break from everything I'd left behind. Inside, my aunt showed me to the small room at the back of the house. The window looked out over the fields, a wide, open stretch of land that seemed to go on forever. I dropped my bag and sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the wind brush against the glass. I remember thinking how empty it all felt. The next morning, I woke to the sound of footsteps outside. Soft, steady. I pulled back the curtain just enough to peek out and saw him near the barn, moving like he belonged to the rhythm of the place. Eli. He didn't look up. He didn't know I was there. That made it feel like I was watching something private, something I wasn't supposed to see. The way he paused to rest his hand on the fence post. The way he tilted his face toward the sun, eyes closed, like he was taking in more than just the warmth. I told myself to look away. I didn't. At breakfast, my aunt mentioned him casually. The Amish family down the road. They help us out sometimes. Good people. Quiet folks. Quiet. The word stayed with me as I stepped back outside, the morning light spilling across the yard. I spotted him again by the barn, and this time, he saw me too. Our eyes met, just for a second. He nodded, polite and distant, then went back to his work. My chest did something strange, like it had missed a step. The days settled into a routine after that. Chores in the morning, long walks in the afternoon, evenings filled with the hum of insects and the soft glow of lantern light. Every so often, I'd catch a glimpse of Eli in the distance, by the fence, near the well, standing in the shadow of the barn doors. We didn't talk much. When we did, It was about simple things. The weather, the animals, the way the clouds were supposed to roll in by nightfall. But there was always something else there. A pause that lasted a little too long. A look that lingered when it should have moved on. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, I heard a sound from the barn. Not the animals, not the wind, something softer, uncertain. I stood at the edge of the yard, my heart picking up speed for no reason I could explain. Every instinct told me to go back inside, to stay in the safety of the light and the familiar. Instead, I took a step toward the darkened barn. What am I doing? I thought. And why does it feel like whatever waits for me in there already knows my name?